You know, Glenn, that you're the president of the Atlantic Amateur Hockey Association.
Yeah.
So, to start off, what is the Atlantic Amateur Hockey Association and what area does that encompass?
So, the Atlantic Amateur Hockey Association, or what most people refer to as Atlantic District, it will encompass New Jersey, Eastern PA, and Delaware, and a little tiny portion of New York, where Sportorama and the Ramapo Saints play. That's kind of been annexed to Atlantic District from 45 years ago. So, it's been with us ever since.
Wow. So, in terms of like hockey, that's a huge area that you're in charge of in terms of the youth hockey players. Um, so can you tell me a little about your personal journey in hockey and
Sure.
how this came about for you?
Quite accidentally. In fact, most of the great things in my life are pretty happenstance, like just by accident. So I was at a public skate session when I was about 12 years old. Grew up in Jersey City, single parent, household, and skated at this outdoor rink in Roosevelt at Roosevelt Stadium, which was like a 40,000 seat baseball stadium. And in fact, the famed Brooklyn Dodgers played 7 games there, almost considered it, looking at it as their new home. And so behind center field wall was a full size ice rink. And I would go from the time I was a little kid. My parents would bring me and my sister, and we'd go skating. And this particular afternoon was a day after Christmas, and I literally collided with another kid. We both went down. He got up pretty quick and he looked down and he goes, "It's those damn figure skates. That's what's your problem." And I go, "I don't know what the difference is."
Right.
I didn't know there was anything other than, he says, "Oh, you got to get hockey skates." So I went home and begged my mother that afternoon to take me to Two Guys department store. And after about an hour of nagging, I finally won, and we went and got these Sherbrooks for $24.95.
Wow.
And I went back that night and I see this kid again, Kevin Russell. Kevin says, "Look at you, you're skating better already." I think he was full of it. I think he was just trying to make me feel good. But he says, "Oh,
Uh,
you gotta start playing hockey." I go, I don't know anything about hockey. And he says, "Oh, come to my house and I'll give you the equipment." Well, as it turns out, his parents knew my parents, and there's long history there. And so that began the journey. And I was a terrible, terrible hockey player. I was not good at all. And I don't say that as like, I knew I was not good. I was one of the weakest players on the team. But as I tell this story to everybody that'll listen, um, every one of those guys that were on that team are still friends today for the most part. And none of them ever made the weaker players feel any less important member of the team.
wow.
And we were all one family, and the coaches demanded that. If they demanded anything, they demanded that we all respect each other and be good and
Mhm.
kind to each other. And as I said, some of those guys are my dearest friends to this very day. So that's kind of the journey.
Right.
And I know you're going to ask some questions about officiating, and that
Yes.
our association they basically forced you to become a ref.
Wow.
They
That's
made you
good
do it.
though.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
fantastic. Uh-huh.
Gives you different, and if you didn't like it, that was fine. You did a couple of games. So when I was 15, I started officiating. You would literally line. They wouldn't let you ref. You had to be a linesman for 2 years. You don't get to wear the armbands. There's just, you're
The
gonna be
coveted
yeah,
armband.
you're gonna be a journeyman, and you're gonna learn the job. And
Hmm.
so you would learn with officials that were really good and officials that weren't so good. And that was for 2 years. And then when I turned 17, I realized I could borrow mom's car and travel around a little bit and do
Right.
more and get paid for it, because we didn't get paid.
You
The
guys, oh,
association, no, it was all volunteer work, which
wow.
was fine for us. We were
It was
okay
good
with it.
experience.
Great experience. It was great experience. So from that standpoint, when you're a weaker player, or a weaker skate, it's all about skating. Officiating helps because
Right.
it gets you on the ice more.
Hmm.
Okay, so fine, you're doing might and squirt games, but you're on the ice. That matters, and it gives you the ability to, just get those more touches. So that helped me, and then I became a marginally better player, just a little bit.
But you're a great teammate, so that's the best part of it.
Well, I hope they. I think they felt the same way for the most part. So
Okay, well, so talking about officiating, so and also talking about the $24 skates. Hockey is expensive
yeah.
because now, I mean, the last skates that I got for my son, I think they were like $900. So they're yes, but of course he had to have them because they made his game so much better, he says. So officiating is a way that they can actually make money to save towards his own gear. So what's the criteria and process necessary to becoming a hockey official now?
USA Hockey has a series of things that they have to go through: attending a seminar, taking an online test. They have to do the safe sport and all of those, the same, background check and all of those same things that a coach would do.
Hmm.
And it's fairly straightforward. The first part is that open book test that you do online. It's fairly easy to go through, and it forces you to open the book and learn the rules that way. It's just a great way to do it. This year, I think, was a little different. We were trying to, like modify how we did it this year. It was really challenging, obviously. And I know the numbers are down across the country. I think our district, and I tip my hat to Jimmy Doyle, who's been, Jimmy Doyle worked at the 1980 Olympic Games, and he's our referee in chief. And, he's been around pro hockey, almost his entire adult life. So Jimmy really did a great job along with his staff, to kind of get our numbers where at least it could sustain the level of hockey that was happening in our district during COVID. But I think, for someone starting out, I know there's some challenges in some states. I feel that, and I know there's probably two schools of thought on this. Some will say, oh, don't get the younger kids involved because if they don't live close to the rink, mom and dad have to drive them. It's a chore for them. They're not getting paid. Um, but I find that when you can get the younger, like a 12, 13-year old, interested in officiating before they hit that high school age,
Right.
I think it sticks with them a little better. I think from a pay standpoint, I mean, you tell me where you can make your own hours, work
Right.
for $30 an hour at
Mhm.
started. That's the bare minimum, 30
Right.
bucks an hour, and make your own hours. So I think that's a great start. The work issue, some states don't allow it. Some states have exemptions for young sports officials.
Right.
I know Pennsylvania does. We're working on one in New Jersey, just to see, because the pool is so thin right now. If you just
Right.
do a quick Google search,
Hmm.
officiating shortage, every single sport is struggling with this issue.
Wow.
When you consider the pay scale, a high school game, I think, pays a buck 25 now, $125.
Wow.
Up in this region, that's a lot of money.
I was actually going to ask you that, like, what was the pay scale? Like, how much can you get paid as an official? So it goes from like $30 up to $30 a game to 125 a game.
Oh,
That's
even higher. Some of the junior leagues will pay 200, 250. Some of the like the Division three, even college club,
mhm.
pays really good money. Depending on the system they use, whether it's a 4-man system, 3-man system, the pay is really good. I think a midget game, an 18U or 16U game, I think for the crew is somewhere around 250. So figured
Oh,
out how that gets divided up. The money is there, and when you think of college kids, it's a great opportunity for somebody who's in college and just needs a couple $100 a week. You could go do
absolutely.
2 or 3 games, and you've only burned maybe 6 hours, including drive time. You find other work that's
Right.
that easy to do. Now the complication for us is you have to be able to skate, so it's not like you can pull anybody off the street and say, hey, come be a ref. You have to
Right.
be able to skate.
But for the players, it also helps you see the game from a different perspective. So I think it
Yes.
also helps with your game. You're seeing it from the reffing perspective, so you can sort of get a sense of what you should and shouldn't do
Yeah.
if you don't
You know
know.
who I find makes some of the better referees? Goalies, because they're already watching the game, a lot of it.
Right.
So they're
Right.
already seeing how their teammates kind of get away with stuff. So they kind of know what to look for. And I find goalies make excellent officials.
Okay, so now do you have, if you're thinking about like three tips on how, because I know some kids are have problems getting assignments and getting enough games. So if you could have three tips on how to maximize the assignments for a new official, what would that be?
Probably the first one would be against the law, which would be to maybe go after a couple of those assigners. Um, but assigning is a tough gig. They have a lot of games to assign, um, and because it's you have this independent contractor relationship, I get to pick and choose as the ref. So you can say, Glenn, do you want to work any of these games? I can sit there and go, no, I'll wait for the 2 o'clock game to become available. So you have all of this
Mhm.
going on and all of these slots to fill. So what happens, I find, and the number one rule for me for young officials is to be persistent, getting in touch with assigners. Don't, because that's what I did. Even back in the day before we didn't have email. Everything was done by phone, or
Wow.
you attended an association meeting, which was a great way to get games. You would go to the meetings, maybe cover a couple of topics. It'd always be a learning exercise. They would have some good instructors there. And then you'd get a couple of games. And that's how they would fill in, for work. But now everything is digital, so it's press of a button. And I think what happens is signers find themselves narrowing their vision on a group of officials that they deem to be loyal, hardworking. And when I hear these stories about officials working 12, 13, 14 games in a weekend,
Wow.
I just listen. I have a dear friend of mine who's, I think he's 42. He's already had both of his hips replaced.
And he's still repping.
42. I'm like, that just shouldn't happen. And he worked high level college Division 1, but he worked a lot of it. And that's a wear and tear on guys. So we need to get our arms wrapped around the assigning process to make sure these young officials, um, I think, to get integrated into the pool and become routinely working with players. There's also another challenge, and I understand this from the assigning side. If you repeatedly reach out to a player and say, hey, can you do this game, can you do this game, well, I got a game, I can't
Right.
work that day, they get a lot of no's. And
Mhm.
so it does become a challenge. So and obviously, you want to try to attract players that are athletes,
Right.
and the better athletes have far more rigorous schedules. And that's not universal, but with some of the players that Makai, your son, has played with, and
Mhm.
himself, he's an athlete. He's got a rigorous, demanding schedule. Try and fit in a game. It's hard. Spring,
I know.
summer maybe presents an opportunity, but so they get rooted in a group of officials that they find to be easy. They're going to always say yes. One of the other challenges we faced, at least because I look at the data, just a data nut. I like to examine it. In 2008, when the financial crisis hit, our average age in the Atlantic District was 25. And just 6 years after that, the average age went up to 36, I believe it was.
Wow.
So what happened was older guys who have responsibilities, car payments, mortgage payments, kids, and maybe weren't working as much or hit a hard time, called their assigner and said, load me up. I need a lot of games. I got to make my mortgage payment. And that edged out a lot of younger guys. And so all of a sudden we lost them. And that's, so when you look at the turnover, I believe the number is, don't quote me here, but I think we lose like 5,000 officials every 2 to 3 years total. And we only have 20, I think it's 25,000, rough number. I mean, we
Wow.
bring new ones in. We're really good at getting the new ones in, but the retention, we have so many young officials that come in. And actually, it might actually be 5,000 officials a year. And that's not hard to understand when you think about it across, because we'll bring in another crop of 5,000 new officials, right? So we
Right.
backfill really well. By the way, this happens on the player side. The same thing happens on our player side. We lose on average in the Atlantic District about 5,200 players every
Mhm.
year, but we bring in 5,500 or so. So our growth means just a little bit, but That's what
And
happens.
then you also end up you're losing a little bit of that experience because the guys they have a little bit more experience, so then you're bringing in always like a fresh crop, but they don't have like that experience that they're building upon. So it would be great to have, more to build upon. And that comes into my next question, which is about progression. So once you become a hockey official, you're getting assignments. Are there programs available to help people pursue a career in officiating? Like, is there a specific path to get you to the highest levels, college, NHL, Olympics, in terms of officiating?
I think this is an area where we could probably do better. The USA Hockey has the National Officiating Development Program, which focuses for the USHL and the North American League principally to help those two leagues staff their games with well trained officials. A lot of it happens just because you're in the field and you're working. So you get a reputation of being a good official. All of a sudden you move up. Now you get a couple of North American League games, a couple of USHL games, and now you're on the radar screen. And you can get pulled in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of college hockey to work in the Northeast, D1 and D3. So those assigners and those individuals responsible for those areas will say, "Whoa, this guy, this gal is a really good official. Let's try to recruit them over to do a Division I schedule or Division III schedule." I think the pro leagues, I think the Coast League is probably Steve Thompson heads up their operations, and he's a graduate of the USA Hockey Officiating Development Program. So I think he kind of knows the pathway. I think there's definitely some better ways to talk about it. I've actually had conversation with Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly about some of these things so that it can get better organized. And the thing that I think it resonated with him too is that it all boils down to making officiating an attractive athletic endeavor. So if the National Hockey League holds up a sign, for lack of a better term, and says that it's just as important to be an NHL hockey player as it is a referee, and it's the same athletic endeavor, because there's a notion that being an official isn't cool. Especially, listen, I've had these conversations with Division I players, and that have finished and they're taking their quote real jobs, and I'll
Hmm.
say, "Hey, do you want to officiate?" And they're like, "Oh, are you crazy? I don't want to be. I hate officials." Like, that's a mindset we need to change. They're an
Right.
important part of the game. So I think we can definitely do a better job. I think when you're in a local area, look, there's some really good officials out there that can absolutely work higher level games and don't want to. They don't want to be in their car driving 400 miles to this arena and then the next night having to be in a different arena, and just putting all the miles on the car.
But somebody could try to could look up the national officiating program and maybe get on their radar, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the approach they take is they have a fairly open policy about if you're interested and you've got wheels, you can skate. They're gonna give you a shot. They're definitely going to give you a shot. And if they can't, if they're not going to get you into the North American League or the USHL schedule, they're going to get you downstream, maybe working the NA3 or Tier One or some of the other junior leagues, and then they'll see you. Then they'll follow up with the supervisors and stuff to see how your progress is. There's not a lot of secrets out there with respect to good officials. Most people pretty much in that realm know who they are.
Okay, so if people know that they're interested, they just have to let people know they're interested and then sort of,
Persistently, in
right.
some cases, you got to, I mean, look, when you come in, they call it, for a player, they call it body of work. Well, he went to Quebec Pee Wee, and then he was on the 14 team that went to Sweden, and then he was select. So they look at player development body of work. Well, officials too. If you say, well, I'm a second year official, and I've worked, squirt A and B level. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Those are,
Mhm.
they need officials too, but you don't have the body of work to say work a midget 16 AAA game. over time you do. Now there are some. I remember I got in trouble. There's a young guy who was retired pro, minor league, Kevin Kaminsky, Atlantic District kid. Everybody knew who Kevin was. Now coaching, but he was started out as reffing, and we started using him as a level one. And I got in trouble. The refereeing chief at the time called me and says, "He's a level one. He's first year official. You can't." I go, "You don't understand. He skates better than all of your officials, most of them, and certainly better than all of our players. Why wouldn't I use him? He can line a game. He can drop the puck at center ice. He knows what, he knows what to do." So sometimes you do find that official that is just a natural, and they should get. I remember the kid I mentioned to you before who's had both of his hips replaced. We picked him up when he was about 23 and had him working Met League games in New Jersey. And the guy, he was from Long Island, and the assigner from Long Island called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I go, What?" And he said, "Well, you're signing so and so. He hasn't paid his dues." And I went, "Well, how much does he owe?" And they were like, "No, it's not money. He's got to put his time in." I go, "You don't understand." I said, if you were thinking in terms of a player and the best player on the ice, I told you he had 1 year experience, but he's still the best player. Would you take him? Of course you would. Well, that was the case with this official. He was one of the best skaters in the group, and he was a terrific official. And obviously, he went on to work. Fortunately for him, he had a really good full-time job. He had a
Mm.
good education, and so he wasn't pursuing it as a dream. But I believe he worked the American League and college and everything on down, and really talented official. So it's there if you're good, and people are going to notice you if you're good.